All right, people are still joining, but I think we should just go ahead and get started. We have so much to cover and we have so much to talk about that we don't want a moment to be wasted. So welcome, everybody. I'm Jim McCarthy. I'm the CEO of Goldstar and the host of this expert chat, but not the most important feature of this expert chat. We have a couple of great guests with us today. And of course, as always, we have our new consumer sentiment data to share. But first, before we get to that, I'd like to introduce you to our guests. Both people who are here today to talk about online events, which we have a lot to say about, and there's so much to say about it that we're not going to be able to fit it into our time, but it'll be a start. First person I'd like to introduce is Jeremy Wein. He founded Play-PerView, which is a new live streaming theater initiative featuring Tony Award winners and a constellation of stars, I like that, from the worlds of Broadway, off-Broadway, film, and television. His producing credits include Kevin McDonald Alive, Neva, Godspell, Faux Snow, Take Me Home, and the documentary The Bitter Buddha. He's the founder of New York City Podcast Festival and produced the debut EP for the U.S. Open. I didn't know the U.S. Open had it. We'll hear about that in a second. So many things. Please welcome Jeremy Wein. Jeremy, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to spend some time with y'all this afternoon.
Very cool. And I would also like to introduce someone I've known for quite a while. Many of you know, many of you have gotten a lot of emails from him over the years. Thomas Cott. Thomas is the Senior Director of Marketing and Creative Content for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, where you've been since 2008. So you actually, when we met, you had kind of just started in that job. I now realize it seemed like you'd been there forever, but so young and naive. Most recently, he's led the Ailey organization's free online programming initiative called Ailey All Access, which has reached to date 27 million people across 121 countries on social media channels, and is known so far beyond just Ailey for his little hobby called You've Caught Mail, which was daily digestive news and commentary he curated from 97 until 2016. And I knew that if ever I did a blog post that suddenly had hundreds and hundreds of people reading it just like that, it was because it had been included in You've Got Mail. So Thomas, welcome. Great to see you.
Thanks, Jim. Great to see you too. All
right. So we're going to get to the data in just a few minutes, but I thought we'd take a few minutes for Thomas and for Jeremy to talk a little bit about what they're working on and just their general thoughts on online events and how you have put them to use. So I don't know, we'd like to start. Jeremy, you want to start? Tell us all about Play-PerView and the other stuff that's on your mind.
Sure. So Play-PerView is an organization that was founded as a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are a live streaming theatrical experience program where every single reading benefits a different organization, whether it's a nonprofit theater or a community organization that is being directly impacted due to the pandemic. So far, in a little under 6 months, we have done 22 readings. We have donated to nonprofit theaters in 7 different states, in addition to dozens of community organizations. And with our last reading, we passed $100,000 raised for these organizations. It's been a lot of work, and we have 3 readings coming up throughout September, and we have 4 more on the books behind it, and it's just going, and yeah, I don't know what sleep is anymore.
No, hey, that's optional. That's optional. Yeah, absolutely. When you're working on something you're excited about, it's sometimes hard to prioritize sleep. Well, Jeremy, thanks. And we'll have a lot more to say about that. Thomas, 27 million people reached in 121 countries. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, just to give that a little context to that, I mean, we're the largest modern dance company in America, and typically in a given year, we would serve about 500,000 people in terms of live performances and other educational activities we do. So this is exponentially larger, obviously. Although we've been to 71 countries physically across our 62-year history, you can reach a lot more people digitally. So this has been just an amazing experience to reach this many people from around the world.
Yeah, you say exponential. I mean, it's 2 orders of magnitude. I mean, more than 2 orders. I mean, it's just incredible the reach that you can get on that. So it's exciting to hear that that's going on. So there's so much more to say about online events. I think what we'll do now is we'll jump into the data the new data from our consumers. And that, as we go along, you guys just jump right in, make comments. I'll probably ask you your take on things as we go. I also want to say to everybody who is listening in that you should open up your chat. And by all means, well, I tell you what, let's practice the chat a little bit. All right, let's practice the chat. So go to open your chat window, and what I want to do is a rapid fire thing, real quick. Go there if you could, and if you have been or if you have watched an online event during this whole thing, type in the name of the thing that you saw, and I'll just read them out so people can get a sense of what you've seen. Just deluge me with things that you've typed that you've seen. Love to read those out. Lena Hall, a 10-minute new play festival. Ailey, that's good. You got one of those times. Concerts, of course, The Present, really interesting thing happening on their Songs for a New World. Ailey, you got another one, Thomas. Well done. Broadway Up Close, socially distant comedy show. Kara talks about, I think it's Shift, Arizona Art When You Want It. Pomona College Convocation Ceremony, that's exciting. Versus TV, Sondheim Birthday Celebration, Jazz on the Plaz in Los Gatos. Third Coast Percussion, lots and lots of local Atlanta singer-songwriters. The Fab Four, nice. National Theater Live, Red Rocks Unpaused, While We Breathe, Guthrie Theater, Sun Valley Online Gala, Goldstar Webinars. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Not exactly a show, but it's still a thing, right? Irish Repertory Theaters, The Weir, tons of those. Okay, so part of the reason that I do this is just to get a feel for it. Virtual Renaissance Festival performances, that's cool. Can't really get the giant turkey leg virtually, I guess, but that's all right. Part of the reason I did that is because we want you to participate in the form of questions, comments, etc. Someone's going to be kind of cueing me and letting me know when things come in. So if you have questions as they come up, either during the data or during our conversation, just let us know. We'll talk about it. We'll address your question, hopefully. And if there's something that Thomas or Jeremy or I can answer for you, we will do our best to do that. So now we all know how to do it, and I think we're ready. So I'm going to share my screen now and walk through the data here. Hold on. So we started the Goldstar Consumer Sentiment Survey project back in May, and the goals are two. One is to gauge the ongoing sentiment of the event going public, especially people who go out a lot or somewhat a lot, because this is really the group that drives our industry forward. And then, of course, to share that information with our event partners and the industry as a whole, and really anyone who's interested. The way we do it is we do this twice a month on a large scale to all ages and 17 major metros to make sure we get tons of data coming in. It is a large sample. This survey is kind of in the summer slowdown, so we had 3,044, which is smaller than usual, but still pretty large enough to have valid results. And the people who answer are frequent event goers. These are people who go out fairly often. 70% said they go to live events, normally at least once or twice a month. So these are people that really do matter in terms of the business, like the bulk of the tickets that you probably sell normally. So their opinion kind of holds that a little bit of extra weight. Not that other people's opinions aren't valid. It just for the industry tells us a bit more. Okay, so the main question that we ask every time is what we call the return readiness score. And what we do is we ask people on a scale of 0 to 100, and they can answer by moving a little slider bar along in the survey. On a scale of 0 to 100, how willing are you to go out to live events right now, assuming that they're being produced and assuming that it's legal and so forth and so on, where an answer of 100 means I'm totally ready, just let me at them. And 0 basically means no way, not going, not happening. And our score from 0 to 100, our average score for mid-August is 39. So 39 is, well south of the midway point, up 5 points from the previous survey, which was 34. I don't know, just Thomas, Jeremy, reaction, or anybody, reaction to this? Does this surprise you? Not surprise you?
No.
I mean, yeah, I know that this is it's interesting to watch this go. I remember, what was it, 2 months after everything shut down, there was like one initial big survey that was like, what's your likelihood to return within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, all that kind of stuff. And I think it was like 17% said that they would go back to the theater if it opened tomorrow.
Right.
So it's interesting to see the number is going up. Yeah, that would be my response to that.
Yeah. Thomas?
Yeah, I think it's consistent with the other research I'm seeing right now, which is, there's a bunch of different industry research projects around this topic, taking the temperature of people around the country, as it were. And I think what you're seeing is in part because it's just not literally possible to go right now in many parts of the country. But also, I think, there's so much else going on that, factors into this. Unemployment is significantly up, and, economic impact of that, and schools aren't opening. So, parents are becoming at-home teachers and stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of distractions and things that the last thing people are thinking about right now is going to see a play or dance concert or, something like that.
Yeah. So to dig into this a little bit more, actually 39 is the average, but we had a good comment 2 or 3 chats back, and someone suggested that we break it down not by average, but by what the answers were, like a histogram of the answers. And so you can see here that the largest single group is the no way side, the NFW crowd, the 0 to 10, and the second largest group is the sure. I'm ready now. Now, and of course, the no way crowd still is the largest by far, but there's definitely a crowd that's if the events were produced, they'd be there without a doubt. And actually, 39 is in the bucket, the 31 to 40 bucket, which is actually one of the very smallest. So the average is a little deceptive here. You've got differences of opinion, a little bit bimodal. I always think this look at it is interesting when you compare it to an average.
I might be jumping ahead, but does this break down into what the event is? If it's a concert, if it's a comedy show, if it's a play, because I'm wondering how that possibly skews the numbers, because someone may be more willing to go to an outdoor comedy show versus an indoor play, even if it was legal, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. There's a couple questions coming up that clarify some of that. Not so much by genre, but you'll see it goes by venue size and some other factors. I think there's the famous story of the man who drowned in a river whose average depth was 4 feet. Right? That's the whole issue with averages, right? Like your average can be a little bit of a deceptive number. So I think it's going to be interesting as we watch this data change to see when and if that tall bar on the left there starts smushing out and moving out across the landscape there. So there we go. This is the trend. So I can't believe it now. This is the 9th survey that we've done, and you can see that it has really lurked in this low 40s to mid 30s kind of range the whole time. We had from mid-May through mid-June, we had a little uptick in optimism. That got knocked right down, and then we sort of climbed a little bit since then.
Yeah, I think the other thing that will be interesting to see is if you ask that same question about how would you feel about going in 3 months or 6 months, I think you'll see higher numbers for that.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, of course, is that if we had asked that in May when we started this, I think some people would have said, "Oh, in 3 months, I'll go," and then here we are 3 months later, and it hasn't really changed. I think it's that sort of like over the horizon timeline that people go like everything will be different then, but it's interesting to see. So we're breaking it down by market. This is basically just taking the same data and chopping it up by metro area.
I love that Las Vegas has the highest yes rate, because that town is just full, like that town is the symbolism of risk in America. So why wouldn't it have the highest likelihood to return?
Totally. As I've said before, these people are crazy. And actually, this isn't a crazy number. A few 2-3 ago, Las Vegas was like 65. Like it was just off the charts. It was just like, come on, people. And it's come back, more or less in line. But yeah, you're right, Jeremy. Las Vegas was basically founded on yes. If you think about it, right? Like the answer is not no in Las Vegas. So good point. Las Vegas at 49, Philly at 48 has surprised me. They've been consistently higher than other cities in the East. Houston, Sacramento, Dallas, those have been a bit higher than everybody all along the sort of non-coastal cities, and then other. You might be asking, what is other? Other is anybody from any city other than the ones that we specifically asked about. So other, doing all right at 45.
I saw someone in the chat says they're surprised that there's no Los Angeles on the chart. Is that rolled into other?
Hold on, you'll get there. There's a whole other sheet of cities. We did this on one sheet, and then the letters were so small that it was too much. We'll get there. It's just you can tell then that it's going to be lower than 42 because it's not on this first page. San Diego, Phoenix, New York at 42. What do you guys think about that? You're New Yorkers. What do you think about 42 for New York?
I think that's impressive.
I think yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I will say, as we're talking about looking at these numbers in regards to live events, what I've also been looking at is, before the pandemic, I host a monthly movie musical series at Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn. So that's a film series. So, I've not only been looking at numbers like this in regards to live events, but, trying to look at surveys of how likely would you be to go back to a movie theater if it opened tomorrow and everything was in regulation, et cetera, et cetera. We did internal polling on our Twitter account for that event. And I've seen numbers in the high 70s from some of these surveys that were like, oh, if movie theaters open tomorrow, I would go back, which I think is interesting to parallel, like seeing numbers in the 70s for like movie theaters versus like mid to high 40s for live events.
Yeah. I'm not sure what people think is different about them.
Hey, Jim, one thing that's a little confusing to me is the average was 39,
yeah,
right? But most of the cities that have been pulled out on these two slides are above that. So what's pulling it down? Shouldn't it be higher?
I'm actually looking at that thinking that what you're talking about is the larger cities like New York, Chicago, San Jose, LA, DC, San Francisco, larger response bases are probably pulling it down. So if you average these numbers, it'd be higher than 39, but the weighted average is different. So the bigger cities like LA and New York, and for us, the Bay Area, Washington, DC, there's going to be more people responding. So it's a good point. The average of this, the average of averages is actually higher than 39, but the overall number is 39.
Gotcha.
Good point.
And I have to wonder in terms of the data, what the response is in areas where, like, for example, New York is very thankfully right now at like some of the lowest infection rates in the country right now. And so part of me wonders what's the correlation between what the local, COVID rate is versus the likelihood data. New York that number doesn't surprise me so much because, not to discount it, but we're down to a couple thousand cases a week, whereas some of these markets are a couple thousand cases a day now. So I'm really kind of interested to see if there's any correlation between that and the survey data.
I would say observationally, I would say there hasn't been. There's been a kind of strange irrationality sometimes. Other times you could point to it and say, yeah, definitely. But for a long time, some of these markets were unresponsive to the situation. I mean, if you look at San Francisco, for example, or Washington, those numbers are very low, and they don't really correspond with the relative state of play when it comes to COVID in those cities. I think it has something to do with who the people in the city are, right? Like the sort of political take or the personal take on, how they feel about their duty to stay in or whatever it is. So I think, that's a very interesting point, Jeremy. It's been a little bit of a mixed bag on that, I would say. I could do an actual correlation and see, take some data and then map it. But anyway, so again, even though there's variation, it's still varying from 29 to 49. So it's not it's not like some markets are just doing great and everyone's just ready to go. It's a relatively narrow band. We ask about venue sizes, and that varies too. So small venues people are more willing to go to, and that's up a little bit. 38, 27 for medium, and 21 for large. We have a Columbia virologist, Vincent Raccaniello, who's been on a couple of times with us, and his thing is like, you shouldn't care about the venue size. You should just really care about, how far apart the people are. That is his take on it, but it certainly matters to people.
Yeah, it's not just this, how far apart they are from each other, but the staggered entry times, how do the bathrooms get used, are there concessions, are there water fountains, just everyday stuff that you have to rethink everything about the experience.
Or, what did the ventilation systems look like in whatever your space is? I mean, I think that, to be perfectly honest with you, I think that's really like the biggest thing that really should be looked at. I mean, I think that's a big hindrance to the physical theater space right now. These are buildings that were a majority of the theaters in New York, at least Broadway. These are theaters that some of them are approaching 100 years or over 100 years, and, didn't have modern ventilation, didn't have air conditioning installed until maybe 30, 40 years ago. And some of those systems haven't been replaced since. Yeah. So, even if you have one person for every row, if your ventilation system isn't passing the air through filters as much as it needs to be, I think it doesn't matter if you have 14 people in the room or you have 400 people in the room spaced out. It's still going to be the same air. We're seeing these studies now that it is probably hanging in the air longer than we thought, unfortunately.
Last time we had an expert guest who was talking about zero pressure or negative pressure ventilation systems, which actually remove the air, that they actually are super effective in doing what you're talking about. But most people don't have them, and they ain't exactly cheap. So I would imagine the next generation of venue design will indeed have those. So, all right, age. This one is a factor that's very straightforward. People understand this quite well. We look at it in terms of three groups: 35 and unders, 35 to 65, and then 65 plus. And what we're starting to see is more and more separation between these groups, with the middle-aged group and the younger group being, sort of closer together, and then the 65 pluses being substantially less willing to go out, which makes a lot of sense. But this affects different organizations different ways, right? I mean, if you have a symphony crowd, for example, that the demographic is going to skew more heavily there. So. Okay, this is a question we've been asking from the beginning, which was, if you look back at your answer, your general answer, but then you had an assurance that the venues adhered to the cleaning routines and social distancing and all that stuff, how would it change your number? So it went from 39 to 47, and that 47 number is up a little bit from last time. Doesn't surprise me. It hasn't changed much since, this has been the relationship between these two things, about 8 or 10 points of a bump. If people are told this. This was something you brought up a minute ago, Jeremy. What about other kinds of venues? So we ask, describe your willingness to go out to events in venues or locations that are outdoors or that don't require people to be seated next to each other, like museums or aquariums. This number is 59. This number went as high, I think it's 65 or 66 a couple of months ago, and it's up from week to week. So there's definitely a people are more willing to do this than other stuff. We added this question a couple times ago, which is, personally, how willing would you be to wear a mask or face covering during an event? And to your point, Thomas, including before and after the show when you're coming in and so forth. It's been at 86, I think, every time we've asked it. And the histogram on this is also very interesting, which is that there's a very large yes contingent to that, and then a sort of straggling, less willing contingent, including a group that's, I don't know whether to interpret the 0 to 10 as hell no, I won't do it, or I'm just not going to go because of this. I'm not sure which it is, but in any case, thoughts on this?
I want to know who those 135 people are, and you have canceled their Goldstar membership.
No, they could just be willing. They could just be saying, like, look, I can't do it. I'm going to stay home until I don't have to do that. I don't know. But we'd have to have more evidence to cancel their Goldstar membership, I think. So this is encouraging because it's such a major issue in terms of house management, whether people obey policies and so forth. And then the last thing we ask is the thing that we ask mostly to make ourselves feel better which is how much are you looking forward to being able to go out to live events, sports, entertainment, arts again in the future? And this number is always high. It's 89. It's up a little bit from last time. I think this is the all-time high. So we're getting pretty close to that 100%, can't wait mark, which is great.
Who's the 11% that just just don't want to go outside ever?
I'm
period.
good.
Anyways, this is how I was living my life before this happened. Why would I change it after?
Like, you know what? I'm good. I'm just gonna hunker down forever. And that is that's the data. Get out of my screen and come back to you guys. So there we are. So if you have, I'm reminded that it was Denise Esposito who mentioned the negative pressure ventilation system, which actually, rather than just moving the air around in a sort of lateral way, it actually removes it up and out. So that actually reduces the danger even more. All right, so let's just open up the discussion. We're here to talk about online events. And I guess I would just start by saying, either one of you can start this. Walk us through your thinking. Like, Jeremy, you started pretty early on this, right? You just jumped into it.
Yeah, I mean, this was an idea. I walked out of seeing Tamacho at Club Thumb, what ended up being their final show, because if you remember, March 12th is when all the Broadway theaters went, but the off-Broadway spaces kind of were trickling through that weekend. It wasn't until the Sunday where everything finally was like, okay, this is over, like, we got it. So I ended up on the 13th going to see Tamacho at Club Thumb. It was phenomenal. I hope the show comes back in some way. It's one of the best nights of theater I've ever had. And the audience you could feel the energy in the audience. They were applauding. Every scene changed when the villain got defeated, et cetera, et cetera. And I just remember walking out of I remember the doors closing behind me, and I could hear the clock ticking, and it was ticking very loud. And I was just like, I knew that this wasn't going to be a 2-week thing. I had been very aware of the COVID thing since January when it started in Wuhan, when it started to start snowballing. So for me, it essentially was like, well, maybe we can get people on camera and we can do readings, or it was like, what content can we do? Because for me, it was like, people are about to be out of work, people are about to be in very compromised situations. So what can I do to help? Because I'm in a very fortunate position where I don't have to worry about a roof over my head or where the next meal is coming from, and because I have that benefit, and I knew I was going to have time available to me, it was like, how can I spend that time to try to put other people and other organizations in that position? The funny thing is that the idea shifted so fast from day to day because everything was changing from day to day. Originally, we were going to do this on camera in a space and like send it out. And then it's like, no, you can't have more than 20 people in a space. You can't have more than 10 people in a space. You can't have anyone in a space. And so then it became like, okay, in the in-between, it was like Zoom became this thing, and it's like, okay, what if we do a reading on Zoom? And I've been in New York for 10 years, and I just kind of started texting writers that I knew, and I was like, who will say yes to us first? And that's going to be where we're going to go first. And we had Maria Dizia had said, like, I'll do something. We had Marin Ireland say, I'll do something. From initial idea to first reading was 13 days. I'm pretty certain we were the first post-COVID shutdown live stream play reading event thing.
I think it's the first that I heard of. Yeah, I mean, I was paying pretty close attention. It's the first that I heard of. Thomas, how about you guys? What was the thought process that kind of walked you into it?
Well, we've been thinking even before COVID struck that we need to become more of a media company. Mm-hmm. So we were already banking a lot of material that we were sharing, as we could with rights issues and everything. But what happened when the quarantine kicked in is we were able to negotiate with our artists and our unions to share that material in full. Previously, we only could show excerpts. So being able to show full performances quickly was very fortunate for us. And to date, we've streamed 22 full-length ballet videos. But on top of that, our dancers and other artists working with us have also created just a myriad of other content. And that, interestingly, has been even more popular than the performance videos.
Talk about that, Thomas. There's something I want to dig into there.
Yeah.
Can you go deeper on that one?
Yeah, I mean, the dancers, for example, created videos that they would shoot in their apartment or outside, like in a park or something. They also did a conversation series with each other. We did a lot of sort of up-close interviews with choreographers and other artists, composers, and people who worked on the shows that we were sharing. They did what we call dancer diary videos, which are sort of like mood pieces about how they were feeling at a given point in this process. We were able to go back into the archive and share historic footage, like Judith Jamison performing Cry when it was first created. So there's been a lot of excitement around people being able to see stuff they've never been able to see before, basically. And I think all of that combined, the fact that there's been such variety in terms of the programming that we've done, has really made it connect with a lot of people. And, we're really struck by the fact that, we were already working hard to create a big community online, but this process has really, 4 or 5 times increased or reached to, lots of different kinds of people. So I'm hoping when all this does die down that we can continue, because I think even once we are back into our regular performance mode, I think we're still going to be a media company on top of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that strikes me about what you just said is that the content that's being created for the form, as opposed to being transferred from the in-person experience directly to the online form, is in some ways, as you say, more popular than just the performance, right? So I think there's a lot to be taken from that, right? It's not just duplicating the in-person experience. It's another take that's more suited to the form in a way.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to say 2 things to Thomas's statement. First of all, it absolutely fills my heart with joy to hear that so many people are accessing the content. I've over the last 6 months, I've always felt strongly about accessibility, but over the last 6 months, it's definitely intensified. My position is that it's not. It really shouldn't be. I hope we can. It's that we have to continue to be able to do work like this once things go back to normal, whatever that happens to mean. And I say that in the sense of, we talk about a lot about accessibility of the theater, but a lot of those conversations tend to come about financial and potentially demographic. But I don't think we remember physical accessibility. I've had a lot of interview opportunities where they go, "It's so great, you're taking New York City theater out of the backyard and bringing it to people's homes, blah, 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 blah." And it's like, yes, we are, but let's talk about the backyard of New York City. Do you know how many people in New York City love theater that in a non-pandemic setting can't go to the theater on a regular basis because they have medical episodes, they have all this other stuff that would prevent. I got this email from someone and I will never forget it. They said, I had an episode this morning, and if this had been in a real space, I wouldn't have been able to go, but because you brought it into my home, I was able to be there, and I needed this so much in my life right now, and it meant everything to me to be able to see it. So for me, it's like, we can't hold the apple out and say, have this right now, and then everything reverts, and then it's like, okay, sorry, you can't have this anymore. I think that this is the turning point that people have been looking for a really long time in terms of the conversation about digital preservation, access, broadcasting, any of that kind of stuff. And I'm in the process of building an advocacy group to potentially try to negotiate with the unions to make this a more easy thing to build into contracts than it has been for years and years and years. I just don't know how you go backwards after what we're spending 6, 12, maybe 18 to 24 months doing all this digital work.
Yeah, I to broaden that a bit, Jeremy, I couldn't agree with you more. I've given this a tremendous amount of thought, as you'll hear more and more as the weeks go on. But this is there's the social dynamic of it, which I think you just addressed very eloquently. And I would add, for those of you who've been in this business, whether we're talking about concerts or theater or dance or any of the forms that we all do, in live entertainment as the primary driver of a business, it is, and I think Thomas will agree with me, and I think many others will agree, it is a dicey business model. You know the old joke, how do you make a small fortune on Broadway? Thomas, you know this one. Come on.
Well, you can't make a living, but you make a killing.
No, you gotta give me the punchline to my joke. How do you make a small fortune on Broadway? Start with a large fortune.
Oh yes.
I mean, it can. Thank you for the rim shot, Jeremy. I mean, it can be a good business, but it's also kind of a dicey business. And the inherent reason for that is that you have this limitation called physical space. Your reach is highly limited by the nature of the product, and it's a great setup. But this is, I feel, a limitation that we've been looking to solve forever. It's harder to do. There's a lot of inertia, and this episode, as you're saying, Jeremy, has kicked open the door and given us the possibility of breaking that down and being more. The idea that Ailey is not a dance company but a media company is a very intriguing idea. Like, how does that?
Although I do want to clarify that, the live aspect of what we do is still primary to our mission and to our ethos and what we want to do when we get back to what we, call normal in this world. There's something about the experience of seeing us or any live event with other people around you that just you'll never match by watching it on your laptop or on your TV screen. That's just never going to happen. But that said, there are people around the world who will never get to see a live Ailey performance. So for those people, this is the next best thing, and it's a way in for them. Which, so I'm grateful for that possibility as well.
Yeah, I think you can. I think it's going to be important for people to dispense with the either or of it, which is exactly what you're saying. Like, there's no question the live event has value. Actually, Norman Lee has a really interesting comment, and there's a couple others we'll catch up with too that goes along with this. Norman says, as a live events venue, you have a lot of psychological resistance to streaming or recording because it feels disingenuous to the live stamp, especially charging for it. I really think that's one of the biggest barriers to getting where we need to get. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and now is the right time when the in-person thing can't really be done to think about how you make that leap. Jeremy, it looks like you're about to jump out of your chair to say something.
It's interesting. Sorry, it's just, this is a thing that's so funny to me, and it's really been this conversation that like we feel is new but has been going on forever, which is, what does it mean for an event to be live? What does it mean for, when this started, it was like, oh, it's not theater, oh, it's this, blah, blah, and Play-PerView's never subscribed to that we are theater, that we very much recognize that we exist in this space between theater and film, that this is its own kind of dedicated art form. That being said, we already had this argument 6-7 years ago when they started doing live musicals on TV. When they were doing Sound of Music, when they were doing everything, people were like, this isn't theater, there's no audience, blah, 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 this isn't theater, blah, blah, blah. You can go all the way back to Playhouse 60, Playhouse 50, the live play series, like way back in the day. Those were live and happening in person. There's never going to be a replacement for sitting in the music box, for example, sitting in the music box, seeing Dear Evan Hansen, hearing Rachel Bay Jones sing, and me having tears coming down my face. There's never going to be a replacement for something like that. But that being said, we did a live stream reading of Heroes of the Fourth Turning. I had 2,200 people watching at the same time. And we do a thing, we turn our chat off during it, and we turn it back on right before it ends. I couldn't keep up with the responses in the chat. Because even though people aren't physically together, they are having a live experience when it is streamed in real time, because they inherently know that they are having the same experience that multiple other people are having at the same time, and they are reacting in real time as everyone else who is watching it at that moment. So I understand the psychology, but I think it gets lost a little bit of like, oh, this isn't, like what we're doing right now is live. like I'm responding to you in real time. We're responding to other people in real time.
Yeah,
I can talk about this for a very long time.
And don't forget the value of a digital version of a show on the impact it has on the live performance. I mean, there was some article recently that said that I think it was like 40% of the people who watch Hamilton on Disney Plus are more likely to want to see it live now than they were before watching it on Disney Plus.
Yeah, actually, Paul has a comment. Paul Friedman, live is always better, but he asked the question that I've been asking. I think I actually made a funny comment related to your email about this, Thomas. His question is, do fewer people go to sporting events because they're televised live as well? And the answer to that is no. The answer is the opposite, right? They coexist quite well. And I think that's right. And the example that I always use is, raise your hand if you think that the NBA would be a more successful organization if you could only see the game at the stadium, right, in the arena. No way, right? There's no way. And Lindsay Smith mentions the Met in HD and then NT in the UK. Their data is pretty compelling that these are great marketing tools. They're profitable. They bring in an audience. They make people more likely to come. So I think there is that sort of like worry and concern, but I think it's the jury's sort of in on that, at least to some degree, that if it's done right, it's actually a boon to your in-person business.
And I think the one other thing too to think about is, we know that our readings are, it's not like tidal wave spiking, but DPS has sales spikes after we do our readings, or whatever associative publishing organization, because people see the reading and then they want to go buy the play and they want to reread it and they want to read the stage directions and all of that kind of stuff. So I think we also kind of lose track of the idea of like, oh, well, this can be a really great way to drive script sales. This could be a really great way to drive licensing. In a regular scenario, we could do a reading and some college professor is like, oh, I've never known about this play. This would be great for the students to do next year. We should license this. So I think there's a lot of benefits to, I feel very strongly that, people should be thinking about figuring out a way to offer some kind of digital presentation of shows within their seasons, not being the full production, but even if it's literally just the actors sitting at a table reading the thing off the page, I mean, increases the accessibility to the material immensely.
I think they should do more, but that's a good step. Rosemary had a question, which maybe somebody can answer. Oh, Thomas is answering at this moment. Rosemary will ask a question. Curious to learn if there are any presenters, those of us who don't produce our own content, who have successfully cracked virtual programming in a way that's financially viable and sustainable. It's a good question. I think that I would turn that around and say, for people who do produce content, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and what we're facilitating via our own tools is people who do produce content should be tapping into presenters and promoters as a marketing tool and cutting them in on the financial aspect of that. I think that's where we're going, Rosemary, is that the smart move for somebody who produces the content is to, really in a way, lean on the relationships that already exist with the people around the country and around the world who can make sales happen anyway, because they have a base of marketing. So Thomas is suggesting checking out what Cal Performances is doing. I think that's great. But I think what we need is for producers of content to be leaning on a presenter or promoter network to drive sales.
Yes, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I was in another one of these sessions as part of some theater in Texas was doing like a virtual conference. And one of the gentlemen I wish I could remember. He runs the Adirondack Theater Festival, but he has established this company where the business model essentially is they create the show, and then they essentially license the stream to theater companies. So the theater companies are essentially renting streaming rights to the performance and selling tickets to their subscriber base. So you have one performance happening, but you could have subscribers from 30 different theater companies around the country selling tickets to their subscribers.
Right. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think is going to happen more and more. those types of innovations. Lindsay asks a question about name recognition. Is it all about the big guys? So Hamilton, the Ailey, and the Met are big properties. I think Thomas might be delighted to hear their name alongside Hamilton in terms of name recognition. Fine, take it.
If only we're true.
Because when someone gives you a compliment, just take it, Thomas. I feel strongly about this. When the Met and the NT, for example, did everything they did 8 or 10 years ago, it was a very expensive proposition that only organizations of that scale could undertake. But that's, to Jeremy's point, that has changed. That has changed. The tools and what it takes to be viable in this game have changed to the point where I think it sort of behooves smaller organizations to figure out how to make it work. And there are ways to make it work. And that's kind of what we're going to begin to talk about more and more in these expert chats, is what does that entail? I mean, Jeremy, you don't exactly have like a massive organization with a multi-million-dollar endowment behind you.
No, myself and my webmaster press person are the only staff members of our organization.
Yeah.
I essentially am running everything, and some of our readings, I am the stage manager, house manager, and company manager, which is what I've done in physical stuff that I've produced. I'll wear as many hats as possible to keep the budget reasonable, and obviously doing whatever needs to be done legally by the books, of course. But I think, people keep telling, you don't see it until it's over. But people are like, wow, you're doing such amazing things. You're doing such big things. But, I think the fact, like, we've been doing this for 6 months. We have no corporate backing. We're not connected to a big theater. We're 501c3 supported by a very small off-Broadway company. In 6 months, I have 5,500 people on an email list. We worked with a theater company. We did a reading of a show that a company that's been around for 15 years had done, and they have 8,000 people on their email list. So if anything, I think our thing is showing that people want this content. And we're trying to make it as reasonable and accessible. I think, yes, being a named entity helps you to a degree, but I think really just making sure your product is good and it's going to be something that people want to come back to. We have followings now. We have people that come to every single reading. They don't even care what it is anymore. They just love what we're doing. And we started a $5 ticket. Like we're like, we're in a unique position because a lot of people are being generous and giving their time to this, and we provide honorariums, et cetera, et cetera. But, we were able to present the original Off-Broadway cast of Heroes of the Fourth Turning, which had just been Pulitzer finalist listed 2 weeks prior, for $5. You know what the lowest non-student ticket price was for that show Off-Broadway? $79. And during the extension, it was $120. So people want this content, but the problem is that it's been priced out for a lot of people. So I think that's another great thing. I know that this is just verged way away from the question.
No, I think I mean, you're talking about doing something in a different way. So my take on this is that I have a story, which is I've been in the internet, especially e-commerce business, for a long time. And so I can remember things that no one else remembers about the way things were at the beginning of the consumer World Wide Web. And one of my favorite stories is in 1996, when it was really first now Amazon existed, but it hadn't really taken off in the way that it would in a couple of years after that. But once people got the idea that you could buy things in stores online, there was a website that my company was partners with, where the interface was like an old-fashioned map overhead mall, map of a mall, right? Like, picture like that directory at the mall, like here's all the stores. It was like that. And the way that you went from store to store was you had a little guy who would walk, and then you'd go into the store, and then you'd buy things from the store, because it was just so inevitable that when people were first thinking that way about, you're now buying there's a store and you're buying online, they thought, well, how do you buy stores? Well, you go into a mall and and translating directly the form that was into the next form. And it really wasn't until just about that time Amazon said, no, that's not what online shopping is. Online shopping is a different thing. And people are like, oh yeah, that's it. It's not that thing. It's this thing. So I think we're in that sort of mall map moment a little bit, and people, that's that the work and effort that's going to go into breaking the inertia and kind of seeing the insights. I think Jeremy, you're there. Thomas, you were talking about this content that's being created that has less to do with the exact replication of the show, and it's another take on it. So I think we're there, and it is a challenge. It's sort of a challenge that's been thrown down, I think, to the live entertainment and arts industry, but it's one that I think we're more than capable of.
It's so funny because we're set up as a digital company. We've never existed as a physical entity, but the interesting thing is, people are asking, what is the place of us? Where do we exist when people can be in physical spaces again?
Yep.
There is this conversation of how do we bring our operating ethos into the physical space? How do we make it accessible? How do we produce work that's not being given space that it needs space for, or any of that kind of stuff? Our company name actually has a double meaning. It's a play on pay-per-view, obviously, but it's also play-per-view, like the purview, like having a view of a given area. Nice. So there is this conversation of like, can we act as a digital company and a physical company, and how can we blend those two things together where we can be producing work in a physical space, but also still doing the stuff that we're doing and getting that work out digitally to people as well.
I think that's the right way to think. Thomas, we need to let people go here. Thomas, you got anything for us before Paul?
I just want to answer.
By the way, I just want to say Paul just bought a ticket for a Play-Per-View performance. So there you go, Jeremy. See,
thanks, Paul.
Showing up here pays off.
It was worth it. It was all worth it. I made a sale.
I just want to answer one other question that was in the chat from Alessandra Hamilton, I think, about sponsors being willing to be involved in the virtual venue. Yes is the answer. We've had a number of our corporate sponsors and foundation sponsors basically shift their sponsorship over into the virtual realm. So yes is the answer. It is possible.
Awesome.
I would just very quickly agree. I think there's more of a willingness because the underwriting costs are probably way cheaper than like sponsoring a stage at Coachella, or paying however much to have a physical ad placed in a stadium or whatever those things. It's literally like, here's this digital thing sponsored by Apple or whatever, which is versus it's not even a sponsorship. Apple is essentially like co-presenting this Instagram Live thing on their platform and building you can stream the playlist from everyone on Apple Music. So it's like this seamless integration thing that costs them like probably pennies compared to other efforts.
Well, listen, Thomas and Jeremy, I really want to thank you guys for this. For those of you, also thanks for joining us, all of you. We're going to keep talking about online events, and we're going to drill down on some of the subjects that came up today. I know we didn't get to answer every question or address every comment because there were so many good and meaty ones that we got a nice start. But we're going to keep going on that. We're going to post the data for this month, for this survey to the Facebook group, which is called Show Up. So if there's a link in the chat for that. So do join that. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with more. I just really think there's so much more to say. And Jeremy and Thomas and you guys in your organizations have done a lot to move down the highway of where we need to go in figuring this out. I mean, it's just, I think as we get closer and closer to an understanding of the fact that we're in this problem for the long haul, it's something we got to do. We got to figure it out.
I would just, the last thing I would say, because I'm really trying to put this point forward to any opportunity I get. Let's not look at this as a Band-Aid to cover a gaping wound. Let's look at this as a hammer that can be used as a tool to break down barriers. Like, this should be a tool that is used going forward in the future, as far as I'm concerned.
The way that I've said that is it's not a stopgap, it's a supercharger. And it can function as a stopgap when we need a stopgap. But the reality of this is if we get it right, this is a big, big step in the right direction for the industry for a bunch of reasons, right? For the reasons of accessibility, for the reasons of the business model, and a lot of other stuff too. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We will see you in a couple of weeks with new data, new guests, and we'll keep talking about online events. Till then, Jim out. See you later.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Crachez-vous dessus, il est encore temps.